imagine owning a piece of land in California. You know, you have this massive state law on your side that legally guarantees you can build 116 homes on it. You have the blueprints, you have the funding, and the state government has explicitly told the local city they are not allowed to block your project.
Yeah, they've mandated it.
Exactly. And yet 3 years later, you haven't moved a single shovel of dirt.
Why?
Instead, you are locked in this wildly expensive legal battle over a rotting piece of wood and a bumblebee.
A bumblebee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the bizarre, kind of counterintuitive reality of California real estate today.
It really is.
So we're looking at this stack of legal demand letters, project plans, and environmental reports between a developer called Mana Camden Fund, LLC, and the City of Gilroy, California. And the mission of this deep dive is to really explore how a housing project on Hecker Pass Road has just become ground zero for the most aggressive housing law in the state.
It is a phenomenal case study.
Yeah.
I mean, we are looking at a standoff that just perfectly illustrates the collision between state mandates, which are essentially, screaming at municipalities to build more homes,
Right.
and then local environmental laws,
Right.
which are being used as this shield to heavily scrutinize or even halt those same homes.
But before we really get into the weeds of these documents, I think we need to set some ground rules for our listeners. Because housing mandates versus local city control, it's a massive politically charged flashpoint right now.
Oh, absolutely.
People have very strong feelings on both sides of this, so we just want to be incredibly clear up front. We are not taking a side here.
No.
No, they're wrong.
We aren't endorsing the developer's push to build, and we are endorsing the city's push to restrict. We're simply unpacking the legal arguments and this fascinating administrative warfare laid out in these public records.
Yeah, taking that neutral observer approach is really the only way to understand the mechanics of what is actually happening here. To understand how we arrived at this current legal threat, which is very real and unfolding as we speak in August of 2026, we have to look at the catalyst. And everything hinges on this 3-month window back in 2023, specifically May 17th, 2023.
Right, because I saw that date plastered all over the developer's preliminary application, which was filed under a state law called SB 330. So what exactly was happening in Gilroy on May 17th that makes that specific day so critical?
Well, the City of Gilroy was operating without a state-certified housing element.
Okay.
And let's break down what that actually means, right?
Yeah.
In California, the state doesn't just ask cities nicely to build homes.
Right.
They require every single municipality to submit a comprehensive blueprint, which is the housing element, proving exactly how they will zone for their fair share of population growth.
So it's not a suggestion.
No. And the state then reviews that blueprint. And if it's realistic, the state certifies.
And if it's not realistic, or, if a city just drags its feet because the local voters don't want more traffic or construction in their backyard.
Then the city is deemed out of compliance. And on May 17th, 2023, Gilroy's housing plan was not certified by the state. They were completely out of compliance. They wouldn't get their official state certification until August 20th of that year.
Wow.
So that 3-month gap, that is the entire foundation of this conflict. Because the developer submitted their application during that exact window, the project qualified for what is known as the builder's remedy.
Okay, let's talk about the mechanics of the builder's remedy because it is just fascinating. From what I understand, this isn't a new law, right? I mean, it was written decades ago, but basically just sat dormant.
Yeah, exactly. It was originally passed back in 1990.
Oh, wow.
And for years, nobody used it because the state didn't heavily enforce those housing element deadlines. But recently, the state really tightened the screws. The mechanism of the builder's remedy is essentially a penalty for cities that fail to plan for housing.
Okay.
If a city does not have a compliant housing plan, the state temporarily strips that city of its authority to enforce its own local zoning ordinances.
So they just lose control.
Completely. As long as a developer includes a certain percentage of affordable housing in their project, the local city cannot deny the project simply because it conflicts with their general plan or their zoning rules.
So if I'm understanding this dynamic, it's like this high-stakes game of musical chairs, but, with millions of dollars on the line.
Right.
The state abruptly stops the music. The City of Gilroy looks around and realizes they don't have a chair, meaning they don't have that certified plan.
Exactly.
And because they are caught standing up, the developer gets to walk into the room and declare, hey, I make the rules now. Your zoning doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
The developer certainly gets to bypass the local zoning rulebook. And they recently doubled down on this protection, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. According to the updated application we are looking at, the developer modified their project to qualify under a newer piece of legislation,
Mm.
AB 1893, which is informally being called Builder's Remedy 2.0.
Builder's Remedy 2.0.
Okay. Yeah, and to do this, they committed to reserving 7% of the single-family homes, so that's 8 units out of the 116,
Mm.
specifically for extremely low-income households.
Wait, I want to stop you there because that term, extremely low income, it sounds very specific. How does that translate into reality for a single-family housing development in a place like Gilroy?
It is specific. In the realm of affordable housing formulas, extremely low income generally means a household earning no more than 30% of the area median income, or AMI.
30%? Wow, that is low.
It's incredibly low, and it is incredibly difficult for a developer to make the math pencil out when they're building single-family detached homes for that income bracket. You usually only see that level of deep affordability in highly subsidized apartment complexes.
Right, where they can spread the cost out over, like, hundreds of units.
Exactly. So by taking on the financial hit of building those 8 units, the developer is essentially buying an ironclad state-backed insurance policy against the city's zoning laws.
But, looking at these documents, the city clearly hasn't just thrown their hands up and surrendered.
Oh, definitely not.
Because if the state says Gilroy cannot use zoning laws to kill this project, the city obviously has to look for another weapon in their administrative arsenal. And looking at these demand letters, that weapon is the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA.
Yes, CEQA. It is the ultimate wild card in California real estate.
Yeah.
If you lose zoning control, environmental review is pretty much the only remaining mechanism to heavily scrutinize or restrict a development. And the developer's law firm, Holland Knight, is furiously arguing that the city is weaponizing this process.
Mm-hmm.
They sent a demand letter accusing the city of Gilroy of an illegal course of conduct, and they specifically cite Government Code Section 65589.5 THA6E.
Okay, that is a mouthful of legal code.
Oh.
What is the actual accusation there? Like, what does that mean in plain English?
Well, basically, the developer claims the city is using the environmental review process to intentionally cause a multi-year delay, effectively disapproving the project without ever having to take a formal public vote.
Oh, I see. So they just stall it to death.
Exactly.
I think we need to clarify how that delay works mechanically, though, because the letters mention the city is demanding an environmental impact report, or an EIR. How is that different from, a normal environmental check?
It is the difference between a quick safety inspection and a multi-year forensic audit.
Okay.
In California environmental law, the fast-track option is called a mitigated negative declaration, or an MND.
An MND.
Right. An MND basically means the city reviewed the plans, they found a few minor issues, the developer agreed to fix them, and everyone moves forward. It's a hall pass.
Right.
An environmental impact report, an EIR, is a massive undertaking. It requires hiring specialized consultants, conducting months or sometimes years of seasonal wildlife surveys. It's traffic studies, acoustic modeling. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it almost always takes years to complete.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here because this is where the logic feels a little messy to me.
Sure.
Isn't environmental review inherently a good thing? I mean, CEQA was designed to protect the state's natural resources, right? The water table, the air quality. How can a developer point to legally required environmental mitigations and just claim they are infeasible simply because they want to build 116 houses instead of, say, 50?
You are hitting on the central tension of the entire California housing crisis right there.
Yeah.
Because CEQA's intent is absolutely to protect the environment. Nobody's arguing that. But we have to look at how the state's Housing Accountability Act defines the word infeasible.
Okay.
The definition is extremely rigid. Under the law, an environmental mitigation measure is considered legally infeasible if it physically precludes the project from achieving its proposed density, or if it makes it economically impossible to build those affordable housing units.
Wait. So if the city finds a legitimate environmental issue on the site, and the only way to protect it is to force the developer to shrink the neighborhood from 116 homes down to 80 homes, the state law says the city can't do it.
Under the builder's remedy, yes. The local agency generally cannot demand mitigations that slash the project's density. The legal precedent cited in these documents is this case called Tiburon Open Space.
Tiburon Open Space, okay.
Yeah, and the appellate court ruled there that a local agency's discretion under CEQA is actually limited by its other legal obligations.
Yeah.
So if state housing law mandates that Gilroy cannot reject this project for its density, then the scope of their environmental review is legally capped.
I see.
They cannot use the back door of environmental mitigation to force a reduction in density that they are expressly forbidden from demanding through the front door of zoning.
Wow. That brings us to the physical reality of the site on Hecker Pass Road, because this is where the abstract legal theory turns into a very tangible, almost comical standoff.
Very true.
If the city's hands are legally tied on zoning, they have to look for physical impediments on the site itself to force a redesign. And on this particular site, that impediment takes the form of an old, rotting structure known as the Red Hoey Barn.
Yes, the Red Hoey Barn. It is a massive focal point of the city's draft environmental impact report. The city's local Hecker Pass specific plan identifies this large red barn, which is located right on the south side of the highway, as a historically and culturally significant resource.
Okay.
And they are demanding it be preserved for agricultural or agritourist use.
But, I mean, when you read the developer's engineering assessments, this barn is less of a historic treasure and more of a catastrophic safety hazard.
Oh, completely.
They send inspectors out there. The barn has no structural foundation at all. It is suffering from substantial dry rot. It is practically falling over. And the developer offered what seems like a really reasonable compromise, honestly. They said they would carefully dismantle it and salvage the usable, better quality barn wood to use in the neighborhood's landscaping or maybe the entrance signage.
Yeah, but the city determined that salvage operation was not sufficient mitigation.
Right.
In the draft EIR, the city laid out a few options. Option A is to keep the rotting barn exactly where it is and force the developer to somehow integrate it into a brand new housing development, perhaps as a community center.
Which sounds incredibly dangerous if it has no foundation.
Right.
Yeah.
And then option B is to physically relocate the entire structure to another spot on the project site.
And then there's option C, which might be the most audacious demand I have ever seen in a planning document.
It is wild.
The city suggests that the developer mitigate the loss of the barn by physically lifting it up, moving it across a state highway, and placing it onto a completely different privately owned property called Owsley Farm, just so it can be integrated into someone else's historic complex.
It is a remarkable proposition. I mean, the developer's legal team is essentially asking, how can a municipality mandate, as a legal condition of approval, that a developer force a third-party private landowner to accept a structurally compromised barn onto their property?
Right, like, hey, surprise, we brought you a rotting barn.
Exactly. The mechanics of executing option C are virtually impossible, which feeds directly into the developer's argument that these demands are designed to be impossible.
It's the definition of infeasible. And the impossible demands don't stop at the barn. We also have to look at the acoustics, specifically this conflict over the highway buffer and the berm.
Right, because highway noise is very standard environmental impact that needs mitigation.
Yeah.
The city's local specific plan demands a 250-foot setback from the highway to ensure the new homes aren't subjected to excessive noise.
But the developer overlays that 250-foot setback onto their blueprints, and it instantly wipes out 78 of their proposed 116 lots.
Yep.
It deletes over half the project.
Furthermore, the city is demanding a 50-foot agricultural buffer between the new homes and the adjacent farming uses. That buffer would eliminate another 8 lots.
What?
So again, we go back to the builder's remedy and the Tiburon precedent. The developer is arguing the city cannot enforce these local specific plan setbacks if the direct result is a massive reduction in the project's density.
So the developer hires acoustic engineers to find a solution that, protects the density. The experts run the models and they say, hey, we can achieve the exact noise reduction the city wants, dropping the sound down to a safe 56 decibels by building a standard 6-foot solid wood fence with sealed joints along the property line.
Right, a totally normal fence.
Yeah. It is a cheap, effective, industry standard solution, but the city rejects it. Why? Because the local specific plan strictly bans sound walls.
Yep. And instead of a fence, the city suggested the developer build a 6-foot-tall earthen berm.
A berm.
Yes, they want a literal mountain of dirt built along the highway, which again requires massive amounts of space and footprint, cutting right into the developable land.
If I'm tracking the psychology here, the city is acting exactly like a nightclub bouncer dealing with a guy on the VIP list.
Okay, I like this.
Right. The bouncer knows he can't turn the developer away for a dress code violation because the state government put the developer on the list. So the bouncer starts looking for any other excuse to keep the velvet rope closed. He starts checking the treads on the guy's shoes. He demands to see a high school diploma. He tells the developer he has to carry a vintage armchair across the street before he can go inside.
That is exactly it.
Yeah.
The developer's legal team would say that analogy is spot on. The scrutiny feels incredibly targeted and exclusionary, and that perception is heavily amplified when we look at the sudden emergence of wildlife concerns on the site.
Yes, the wildlife section of these letters is just fascinating to me. Suddenly, this plot of dirt is a critical habitat.
Well, the draft EIR outlines incredibly strict protocols for multiple species.
Yeah.
It demands a half-mile, no disturbance buffer if they find a Swainson hawk.
A half-mile buffer.
Yes, it demands focused, seasonal surveys and potential land acquisition to offset impacts to the crotchwise bumblebee. It demands extensive habitat replacement for special status bats and strict construction blackouts during bird nesting season.
And, I mean, on the surface, that sounds like standard California environmental policy, right? We protect hawks, we protect bumblebees.
Sure.
But the developer's lawyers pull out the receipts to show a massive double standard here.
Oh, the comparative evidence is glaring. The developer points out that a completely different housing project was approved on this exact same property just a few years prior, before the builder's remedy came into play.
Right.
And for that previous project, the city only required that fast-track hall pass we talked about, the mitigated negative declaration.
The previous project didn't trigger a multi-year EIR. It didn't trigger half-mile hawk buffers or mandatory bumblebee land acquisitions.
Nope.
The developer's lawyers literally put it in writing. They said, quote, "It seems unlikely that the area recently became more likely to contain Crotch's bumblebee."
Yeah, that was a pretty sharp line in the letter.
They are outright accusing the city of artificially inflating the environmental impacts solely because this is a builder's remedy project. They are punishing the developer for using the state's density loophole.
Which brings this entire 3-year administrative marathon to a critical breaking point. We are no longer just looking at planning department squabbles. We are looking at a real legal ultimatum.
Right. So let's walk through the climax of this timeline, starting with what the developer considers the smoking gun, because this is huge. It's an email dated July 16th, 2026.
Yeah, this email was written by the city attorney, Andy Faber, to the city planning staff, and it somehow ended up in the public record.
Wow.
In the email, Faber states that the city does not need to remove the infeasible mitigation measures, things like the 250-foot setbacks or the barn relocation, at the draft EIR stage.
Even though they know they're impossible.
Exactly. He argues that while the city might eventually have to reckon with the legality of these demands under the state housing laws, they can simply leave them in the draft document for now while it circulates for public comment.
I can absolutely see why the developer's lawyers exploded when they read that.
Oh, yeah.
If you know a demand is legally impossible to fulfill, why put it in the public environmental document?
Right.
The developer views it as a trap. They believe the city is intentionally building a public record filled with impossible environmental standards so that 6 months down the line, the city council can look at the project and say, well, we'd love to approve this, but you failed to meet the environmental requirements, so our hands are tied.
It creates an administrative catch-22 for the developer, and it triggered the final warning. On August 17, 2026, the law firm, Holland Knight, issued a formal demand letter to the city. They put the city on notice that leaving these demands in the EIR constitutes an illegal course of conduct.
Okay, so what's the timeline on that?
By law, the city has 5 days to publicly notice the letter and a maximum of 90 days to formally respond.
And the threat attached to that timeline is severe. Holland Knight states that if the city does not strip the impossible mitigations out and publish a clean draft EIR, the developer is going to bypass the city entirely and file immediate litigation.
You're going straight to court.
But here's the part that I struggle to understand. The developer has been paying for the city's consultants to write this EIR.
Yes.
The financial records in these documents show the developer wired the money to the city back in October 2024. If they sue the city now, after 3 years of waiting and paying, aren't they basically throwing away all that time and money just to get a judge to force the city's hand?
Well, it comes down to a brutal calculation of time versus money. The developer has spent 3 years trapped in a cycle of staff transitions, endless consultant meetings, and escalating demands regarding barns and bees.
Right.
At a certain point, the cost of infinite bureaucratic delay becomes significantly higher than the cost of funding a lawsuit. They aren't throwing their previous money away, really. They're just accepting it as a sunk cost.
A sunk cost.
Right. They are trying to salvage the project by moving the battlefield from the city planning office, where the city gets to make the rules, to a state courtroom where a judge will strictly enforce the builder's remedy.
It is just staggering to step back and look at the whole picture. I mean, the state's Department of Housing and Community Development actually wrote a letter back in October 2023 confirming that this specific project qualifies for the builder's remedy. The developer has an ironclad state law on their side, and yet the local municipality is successfully using the gears of bureaucracy, noise ordinances, historic preservation, insect surveys, to grind the project to an absolute unyielding halt.
It really is the ultimate test of the state's authority.
Yeah.
Because the state legislature can write all the aggressive housing laws they want, but the local governments still control the administrative machinery that executes those laws on the ground.
Which leaves you wondering about the long-term fallout of this kind of warfare. If developers realize that the builder's remedy will always be neutralized by local environmental reviews, how long before they start lobbying the state legislature to strip cities of their environmental oversight entirely?
Oh, that's a very real possibility.
If CEQA is constantly used as a weapon to block state housing goals, could the state eventually decide to take the weapon away and abolish local CEQA review for housing altogether? Something to think about.